Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Live Your Life Well, Mental Health Awareness in the AEC Industry. Today, we will hear firsthand experiences, stories, and effective actions from some of our special guests. We're joined today by Steve Struck and Selma Santin with Kiewit Corporation, Nicole Steffen, licensed medical social worker with Steffen Counseling, and finally, Brian Nickel, Chief Strategy Officer at RS&H. Before we begin, there's a few tips I'd like to share. We're recording this webinar, so you will receive a link to the recording as well as additional resources in a post-event email. At the end of the webinar, we will prompt you to take a feedback survey. Your responses are much appreciated and help us improve the experience for future webinars. You should see in your Zoom options to enable a transcription for this webinar. And finally, everybody is in listen-only mode. We encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A panel in Zoom, and we save some time at the end to get as many questions in as possible. If we're unable to answer your questions, we will reach out post-event to get you the answers you need. So let's get started. I'll pass the mic over to Tom Everett, Vice President and Strategic Advisor at RS&H. Tom?
Thank you, Macy. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be moderating this webinar today. As Macy mentioned, I'm presently a Vice President with RS&H, but that has only been true for about 8 months. Prior to joining RS&H, I worked for the Federal Highway Administration for 38 years, and I retired last June after spending 4 years as the Executive Director, where I ran the day-to-day operations of the agency. My interest in mental health started well before I became Executive Director. However, once I got into that position, I decided it was my opportunity to improve things within the agency. And what do I mean by that? I had a few experiences that revealed a weakness in me as a colleague, a supervisor, and even as a friend and a father. I did not know how to identify and appropriately react to people who were suffering with various mental challenges. From a close colleague who committed suicide to one of my star employees who was struggling with PTSD, to a family member who still to this day suffers panic attacks and anxiety. And in each situation, I felt very ill-equipped on how to be helpful. So as Executive Director, I established a program within FHWA that would better equip staff because I knew I wasn't alone, with the right tools and heighten the awareness of the issues that exist in our workplace. The EAP was certainly, the Employee Assistance Program, certainly a valuable resource, but it wasn't enough. There needed to be specialized training. And one thing I realized after getting into this is opportunities to share stories, because everyone has a story. There also needed to be leadership engagement from top down. And I'm happy to report that the program was thriving when I left FHWA last June and had lots of support and interest across the agency. It was very, very popular with staff. Why is it so important to be discussing mental health in the AEC community? Well, the AEC community is not immune to the workforce challenges associated with employees' mental health. Mental health is relevant to everyone, government and private sector, no real difference. The challenges are real and they are being discussed more openly now than ever before. It seems that every day there's a story in the news that touches on mental health. And unfortunately, many of these stories involve individuals who became so mentally unhealthy they caused harm to themselves or others. Headlines aside, there are both personal and business reasons for us to be concerned. A recent study by UKG shows that 43% of employees reported they are exhausted. 78%, that's kind of staggering, said stress negatively impacts their work performance. And in 71%, also very high, said stress at work negatively impacts their home life. Also not very good, not good for all of us, and not unique to government. And then while attending the annual TRB meeting in January, I participated in a presentation that really resonated with me because it told the story of a company, Kiewit, that was working on the same issues and had been for a few years. And I'm so glad we have two folks here today to share the Kiewit story with you. Before I introduce them, let me quickly run through our agenda. We're going to start with that presentation, and then we're going to follow with a panel discussion. I'll introduce the additional panelists later. And then lastly, our plan is to address questions submitted by the audience, time permitting, and we'll wrap up as close to 2 o'clock Eastern as we can. So now let me introduce our two presenters. First, Selma Santon is a communications director for Kiewit Corporation. She's been with Kiewit for 18 years and served in various capacities, including running public information programs on large design build projects in Texas and Louisiana, and various jobs across Arkansas and Nevada. In her current role, she supports communication efforts for safety, quality, equipment, and procurement. And in addition to her communications role, Selma sits on the company's Under the Hat Steering Committee. You'll hear more about Under the Hat in a few minutes. In fact, Selma sets the direction for the steering committee, so very key player in that. Steve Struck is an area controller at Kiewit, focused on Kiewit's infrastructure engineering function. Steve supports finance, project controls, and procurement activities for approximately $500 million in engineering activity annually. Stephen is an ambassador for Kiewit's Under the Hat program, emphasizing mental health and wellness within the company. He is participating in the Construction Research Safety Association's project to develop tools and frameworks to end suicide in the construction and engineering industry. Welcome, Selma and Steve, and let me now pass the floor to Selma.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for the introductions. Like Tom said, I had the pleasure of meeting him at the Transportation Research Board in DC earlier this year. He did sit through my mental health session, and we got to talking afterwards. And it quickly became very clear that we are very aligned on mental health. We both have a very strong desire to see change in our industry where mental health is concerned. And as Tom said, my name is Selma, and I sit on Kiewit's Mental Health Steering Committee, or the Under the Hat Steering Committee. I've worked both in the field and the support side of our business, and I'm delighted to be here today to share with you some of the efforts that Kiewit is undertaking in terms of mental health. And joining me today is Steve Struck, also with Kiewit, who will share his own story. Now, Steve sharing his story at Kiewit has really allowed us to open up the conversations around mental health internally. He's also going to talk about some of the resources we use internally, as well as recent research that he's been a part of. So, Steve, I'm excited to have you with me on this panel today. But first, let me introduce you to Kiewit. So Kiewit is one of North America's largest engineering construction organizations, and you're probably all familiar with it. We're ranked number 2 on ENR's 2022 list of top contractors. We work in many markets: OGC, power, water, industrial, building, but to name a few. And we have a current workforce of 28,000 staff and craft across North America. So as you can imagine, and inevitably with such a large workforce, we are impacted by mental health. And so it's estimated, according to the CDC, that there are more than 5,500 suicides in the construction industry each year. And although those suicide rates are extremely alarming, and we need to understand them, the topic of mental health in general captures so much. At Kiewit, one of our main goals is to help our people understand the importance of keeping a pulse on their mental health and others, and know the resources available to help them. So we really believe the better our employees are doing personally, the less risk they present to themselves, their coworkers, and the work. So I'm going to share with you a brief timeline of Kiewit's journey. And really the slides are more of a leave behind for you guys if you want to see kind of a summary of Kiewit's efforts. And so I'll kind of flick through them and click through them as I'm going through my presentation today. So Kiewit's EAP benefits have existed for a long time, and however, they were not well publicized, nor were they well understood. And so for a few years now, and before the rebranding of our mental health focus, and with all good intent, we had various groups internally who were running at raising mental health awareness across the organization. And honestly, it was a little bit counterproductive at that point. So in early 2021, a steering committee was formed, led by our Vice President Safety, to study the state of mental health at Kiewit and study our employees' needs. And so the committee conducted extensive internal, external research on best-in-class mental health programs and tools. And so after that extensive research, the committee determined the two biggest roadblocks at Kiewit were simplified tools and breaking stigmas, or as we like to frame that, opening the lines of communications and having everyday conversations around mental health. So in late 21, Kiewit launched a new focus on our mental health called Under the Hat, Building Healthy Minds. And Under the Hat aims to open the conversations around mental health and simplify EAP, access to EAP tools. And we knew that this was only a first, but very important step in the right direction. And we were very, very fortunate at Kiewit that this effort came with strong leadership support. So why did we brand ourselves as Under the Hat? Well, quite simply, it's symbolic of the industry. And it reminds our people to take care of what's under their hat, and that's their minds. And also our people wear many hats, their sons, their daughters, brothers, sisters, friends, co-workers. And we recognize that it can be hard to juggle all those responsibilities and prioritize mental health. So our messaging to our people focuses around having the conversations around mental health, sharing stories, investing long-term in our employees and their well-being, and making the tools available to them, whether in a time of crisis or just looking to work on their overall mental well-being. We want to help our people address issues before they escalate into bigger problems, as well as making resources immediately available to those in crisis. So along with the Under the Hat rebrand came the launch of simplified and accessible tools. We now have a one-stop shop website, underthehat.com. Open to public, you can go to that website, and it's very simplistic by design, so it's easy to find the information. We switched to dedicated EAP phone numbers for the USA and Canada with an enhanced EAP service, and we better promoted our 8 free counseling sessions per issue per year in the US. And we better publicized the EAP was open to employees and their family members. And we also tried to do a better job of publicizing that we offer the non-EAP, traditional EAP services such as legal assistance, financial assistance, and so on. And so while we were heading in the right direction, we still needed to do more. And this was just a first small step for Kiewit. Once we'd had a little time to see how Under the Hat was working for the organization, we dug into the data post-launch. The Under the Hat website launched before Thanksgiving 2021. In the first 2 weeks of launch, the website received 7,100 unique visitors, in essence, a quarter of our workforce. And since its launch, the Under the Hat website consistently sees more than 4,000 unique visitors to the website every month. So in early 2022, we wanted to hear more from our employees. We conducted a survey to all staff employees, and the feedback honestly was very split, with employees having either a very positive or very negative experience with our current EAP. But the fact that the data was so split was just enough for us to drive us into looking how we could improve. We worked with our current EAP provider, which is a non-traditional EAP provider, to dig more into the data provided by them. We saw that EAP engagement has steadily increased since moving to the 8-session EAP model, and individual EAP session annualized engagement rates were, in 2018, 2.2% of our population was using EAP, and by the third quarter of 2022, 5.7% of our population was using the EAP, which in essence almost tripled. So interestingly, cases for depression were up 6 percentage points from 2021, and that is 4 points above the industry norm, the average, the norm. And cases for anxiety were up 5 percentage points from 2021 and 2 points above the norm. Now, this increase in usage in this data, it does not alarm us. What this data tells us is that more people are comfortable seeking the help they need and having the conversation about mental health earlier in their journey. And again, this was enough to push us to do more. So in 2022, we spent time training our craft voice and safety program. Our craft voice and safety program, or CIVIS, is craft representing craft in the field. We trained our CIVIS and our safety professionals to understand both the EAP offerings and to spot the signs of those that might need help. We incorporated Under the Hat into all of our onboarding. And we're running at a pilot project down in Texas with a client, National Grid Renewables, looking at a comprehensive well-being program on their site. And this is a pilot that could be used potentially across other projects. And finally, the big thing that we did last year is we did a really deep dive into the EAP offering in the current marketplace. And I would tell you it was eye-opening. So Kiewit currently has a traditional EAP offering, and we wanted to know what else existed in the marketplace that could better serve our people based on their need and based on the feedback. And so for the last year, a dedicated cross-section of our organization, including staff and craft, has been evaluating best-in-class EAP providers in the marketplace. We put out an RFP for EAP providers, and I'm pleased to share that Kiewit will be switching to Lyra on August 1st of this year, and we're currently in the implementation phase with them. And Lyra is a very progressive EAP provider with its own network of therapists, and it has the potential to be a game changer for our employees and their families. So I hope that in the future I get to speak a little bit more about Lyra, but that's where Kiewit's on their journey right now. So I would tell you that Kiewit, we consider ourselves to be very early in our mental health journey, and this year holds some very exciting opportunities for us to keep developing our focus. And we're just not going to back down on that focus. Under the Hat is becoming a part of our everyday conversations. And we have a smaller subcommittee from across the organization that participates in external research for us, awareness and supporting initiatives as needed, and that's what Steve does. So we're going to continue to do that research across the industry. And then a big focus for us this year is really the resiliency aspect of mental health awareness and what that looks like for us and how we can build that into our onboarding, our leadership, and our core schools. We're also looking at research and best practice on peer ally and advocacy programs. And then a big thing for us, just with the nature of the business, is we're looking at a better framework to support our families. And then the last thing I would tell you, one of the big things we're going to focus on this year is communication. And that sounds so simple, but it isn't. We want our employees and their families to share their stories and connect with others. And one of those individuals that shared his story early on was my colleague, Steve Struck. And today he's going to share with us the power of storytelling and how it could make such a difference within your organization. But before I close, let me say this one last thing. Nothing that I've shared today is proprietary, and nor do we believe it has a competitive advantage. We just believe it's the right thing to do for our people and their families. And we, Kiewit, we want to share our experiences within the industry and beyond, and it can only be beneficial to make us all better. And so I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to continuing this very critical conversation with all of you. Steve?
Well, everybody, thank you, Selma. Selma hit it right out of the park there. One, right on time, 10 minutes, almost exactly. Good job. And two, I mean, the Under the Hat program, if that doesn't inspire you, it certainly did when I heard about this for the first time. I've been a person who has dealt with anxiety and depression throughout my entire life. And I've always found that trying to find belonging in that and feeling like it's okay and using that as a superpower has been very hard to do, particularly when I spend, 8 to 10 hours a day at a workplace, right? And so being able to share my story, and I want to give you a couple examples of what I did and then maybe some tips and tricks in the future, was not only, I think, empowering for myself to take ownership over this feeling that I've had my entire life, but also to hopefully inspire others to either do the same or reach out for help. So that's my goal. And I continue to be involved in a couple different things here that I'll talk about here in a little bit that I hope will further the mission for not only Kiewit, but also for the industry. And looking for other people to be involved. So, raise your hands, please. So a little bit about me. So I grew up in Oregon and grew up an only child. You can't tell from my camera, but I'm very tall. I'm 6'8". And I always grew up kind of being that person that was literally hovering over other people and not really like part of that group. And so I struggled a little bit with, I'm going to go back one slide here in a second and then I'll jump ahead. But I always struggled back, kind of identifying with this larger group and trying to get connected with that social group that I was in. And that in turn with some other things that went on in my life, developed a lot of anxiety, depression, social issues that, kind of dominated my 20s and 30s. And I think one of the things that's been most important now that I just turned 40 is throughout my later 30s, I've been able to share my story quite a bit. both through Under the Hat and some other organizations. And I think the superpower there is the ability to identify with other people that are going through the same thing. So once I started sharing my story, people started coming up to me and say, hey, I feel the same way, or my girlfriend feels the same way, or my wife, or my husband, or my partner, whatever it might be. It's very empowering to feel like you are part of a group. And also for those other people, they are able to reach out and have somebody to reach out to. Now, I will caution that, you know, I'm a white guy that lives in Colorado, right? I have a certain cultural and gender-based experience that isn't necessarily meets the needs of everyone that's out there. So it's important to have variety in that storytelling, but it's also important that people just tell their story. It helps you never feel alone, you feel part of something, and also provides space for someone to share their own story. So what I did and now I've done a podcast with Kiewit, videocast podcast, whatever you want to call it. I've talked at South Central District meeting, which was about 400 construction professionals. I'm doing this webinar and then hopefully some other things here in the future, is try to be vulnerable. So these are just some examples of what I try to do to try to help connect with people. The picture on the left is it's almost my personality in a whole. That's me at probably 7 or 8 years old, fishing with my dad back in the background. And what you don't see there, and I think is true for a lot of people, is you don't necessarily see what that feeling is that I was feeling at that time, which was a ton of anxiety, a lot of lack of safety, like feeling safe, and also kind of feeling alone. And so, you know, it's important to say is in that picture, you might see somebody who's kind of goofy and you know, kind of well-meaning and funny, but in reality, there's more to it. So one of the things I want to ask all of you to do is if you're comfortable sharing your story, please share your story, because it's okay, and it'll make people feel you know, belonging and part of this group. And second, if you don't have a story to tell, then check in with somebody today. Ask somebody how they're doing. Try to identify people that you might feel are struggling a little bit, and just reach out, because it means the world. And I think when people did that to me early on, it felt so much better. And second, this picture over here on the right-hand side, that's me in 2nd grade. So if you don't trust that I'm actually 6'8", then that's the proof, as those are all my classmates. And then that's me up in that little box up there. And you know, that kid was very alone, and it was very isolating, and it was really hard to identify that as I went through my teens and 20s and how to work through that stuff. But I feel like I've come out the other end in a better place. So, you know, that's just a brief story. I shared my story at South Central for like 20-25 minutes, talking about you know, some of the more detailed feelings that I had throughout my life. But what I want everyone to take from this is that it's perfectly okay to talk about your story and share your story. In fact, in today's day and age, as people are coming out of COVID, I was actually just having a conversation with a social worker friend of mine, and she is reporting that all of her private therapy clients are just coming out with the most amount of anxiety that she's ever felt in her clients. And I think that's true potentially for a lot of us. Is, you know, we were isolated for a while. We came out, and now we're not only more willing to share our story, but we're also feeling a lot of feelings. And I'm here to say that it's okay to feel those feelings. So first of all, I already talked about this. Be aware, look for, if you were looking at unsafe behavior in the field, what would you look for? It's the same for being on site or being in an office. If you see someone who is struggling, who might be having a hard time, reach out, see how they're doing. Doesn't mean you have to be nosy. Doesn't mean you have to be overbearing. It just means that you've connected with that person, and you don't know how that affects that person today. It might be really positive. Also, know your resources. So I've had a lot of people reach out in the last, you know, year or so, talking about their own struggles and what they're feeling. And one of the things that I felt was really powerful for me is to make sure that I knew what Kiewit's Under the Hat program was, and kind of be able to point people in the right direction. I'm not a therapist. Nicole is here later to talk about that. I'm not a practitioner of this, but I am very passionate about that. about the idea of mental health. And while that without having the right boundaries around that, it could be potentially dangerous, but that's why you know your resources. You know, okay, there's an EAP program that we have. There's under the hat that Kiewit has that you can go and find resources. We have insurance coverage that provides mental health coverage. You have outside resources. There are so many resources that we have now that back when I was young, we didn't have that, and probably is true for a lot of you. And also there's some really cool new resources out there. I think this link's going to be, we're going to share this a little bit later on. I'm not going to click on it right now, but it's this idea of a workplace well-being roadmap that the US Surgeon General published, maybe less than 6 months ago now. And it's a very useful interactive tool that if you're just starting from the beginning and you have no idea where to start there. And it's going to point you in different directions that will tell you kind of based on real data and real studies, how to create create a framework around your workplace or even around your own personal welfare on how to be happier in the workplace. And then Tom was mentioning earlier my work with the Construction Research Safety Association. So that was something that I really feel proud of being invited to by the Under the Hat team and Selma to take a part in. And there's going to be some reporting issued here in May about what some of the common stressors are in the construction workplace. And sneak peek preview, those top 3 stressors probably shouldn't surprise anybody. Job satisfaction, financial return or financial well-being, and family factors or social factors. So out of 1,400 people that were surveyed, and 500 of those people were in the field, and they were a mix of Caucasian, Hispanic, different cultural backgrounds. Everyone said the same thing: job satisfaction, financial return, family factors. Those are 3 main stressors. And so the next stage of this study, along with this report, is going to be testing the effectiveness of interventions like EAPs, storytelling, outreach on those factors, and see how we can prevent suicide in the workplace. So last, I know I'm just a little bit over, I'm not as good as Selma, but I just want to leave with a call to action. So one, if you're interested, you can take a picture of that QR code in the corner. It's going to take you to our Under the Hat website. That'll be available in the slides. You can see what we've got going on there. But I want to leave you with a simple message, and then I'm going to turn it over, which is mental hygiene is so important. It's just about checking in on yourself and others. You can do this daily, once a day, 5 minutes. It's not a huge thing. And it should be as important as going to the dentist. And it doesn't have to be hard. I'm proof of that. And I just want to leave you with that action. Go reach out to somebody, see how you're doing, or even check in on yourself, see how you're doing. And it could help somebody, really prevent somebody from doing something really terrible. So I want to leave you with that. Thank you very much. And I'm back here to answer some questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Steve and Selma. One, it was great to hear the Kiewit story again. But Steve, there's a lot to be learned from experiences like yours. And it takes someone who's brave and confident to tell their story. And yet it means so much when those stories are shared. So thank you. Let's now move into the panel discussion portion of our agenda. So I want to do some introductions of the 2 other individuals who have a wealth of practical experience and knowledge on this subject. First to join us is Nicole Steffen. Nicole obtained her master's degree in social work from Grand Valley State University and is EMDRIA trained. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but EMDRIA. Trained in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed therapy, solution-focused, and motivational interviewing. Her background includes case management, medical social work, and program development with a focus on trauma work. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us today. Brian Nicole is here with us as well. Brian is RS&H's Chief Strategy Officer. In this role, he leads the development of RS&H strategic initiatives, short and long-term growth objectives, and new business and expansion opportunities. Brian has 17 years of private sector business operations, consulting, and advisory experience, spanning a broad range of senior leadership roles, including global and regional business leader, business developer, strategy advisor, technology director, and other roles that have fancy names. But a wealth of experience. And Brian, thank you for taking time to join us today. So you've heard in the presentation and in my comments and Steve's comments that maintaining a healthy work-life balance certainly plays a role in mental health. There's a lot of pressure in the AEC industry, like others, to be profitable. Brian, I'm going to toss this one to you first. Do you have any thoughts on how to balance these competing needs, healthy work-life balance and the need to help your company succeed, to be profitable?
Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks to Selma and Steve for kicking us off in the AEC industry on the private side. And I spent 18 years on the public side prior, but now the almost 18 on the private side, we look to generate a profit, and we look to do that on a consistent basis as a going concern for companies. And that's a wide range of companies, small, medium, and large. And so what we think is that is inconsistent with health and well-being. And we've thought for many years that we want all of our employees physically to come to work and go home in the same condition. Well, the same holds true for their mental health. And in fact, a work-life balance, and we've learned a lot about that in the last several years as we've been isolated on one hand, and on the other hand, we've now come out of that. And so we've had these two interesting periods of time where lots of stressors have entered in, and everybody thinks that, well, we look after our physical well-being, and that's sort of just a natural thing to do, but it's the mental well-being. And so we have to think about our profit as what the employees bring every day to work. And it's not inconsistent to have healthy, both physically and mentally, employees generating more profit, in fact, when they're in that healthy situation. So I think that's the bottom line. If we look at the bottom line, our bottom line is dependent upon the health and well-being of our employees, no matter what that health and well-being means, either on a physical or mental standpoint. And I want to sort of tie that to a firm. And how can a firm grow if the people in that firm are injured, either injured physically or mentally? And so if we can overcome and take some of the steps that Selma and Steve talked about, bring this to the forefront, deal with these issues on a daily basis, we're going to be more profitable in our industry as a result of our employees being healthier, both physically and mentally.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great way to frame it. And it ties into something I've heard Steve talk about, and that's presenteeism. So Steve, if I could ask you to weigh in on this question as well, but connect it to what I've heard you talk about with respect to presenteeism.
Yeah, of course. Have you ever heard anybody say, keep your personal life at home and don't bring them to your workplace? I heard that a lot when I started my career, and that's just not realistic. And so the idea of presenteeism is, coming in to do your work, but not actually be present. And that could be because you're worrying about something at home. You're worrying about a family member, whatever it might be. And what can be dangerous about that, whether you're in the field or in the office, is the idea that you're now focused on the work that you're doing. And so being present is very important, whether you're raising a child like I am. I've got a 6-year-old. You're married, which I am married. I have a wife. It's important to be present. It's also important to be present in your workplace and try to do the best work possible. It's also okay to raise your hand. Like, I want to really acknowledge one of my coworkers, I won't mention names, of course, who did this a couple of weeks ago, raised her hand and said, you know what, I need to take some time. And that is the way we protect from presenteeism, is by acknowledging that fact that life can be hard. If anybody came through a pandemic recently, it's really hard. And you can raise your hand, say, I need a couple hours, and it should be fine. So be on a watch out for that, because it also often can be hidden in the workplace.
Great comment. And you made me think back to early in my career, a boss that I had said those exact words to me. He's like, work is work and home life is home life, and the two don't mix. And more or less was encouraging his staff. I was a member of his staff at the time to abide by that, but we didn't. And sadly, he died a very young man. And it may be because he didn't have the stress outlets, you spend a lot of time with the people you work with, and sometimes you need to lean on them for support, and that may have contributed. I don't know. Steve, I want to stay with you for the next question, at least to get started. I recall being asked more than once about our program at FHWA. Basically, with all the resources that we're putting into it and all the time I'm asking folks to put into it, how do I know it's effective and paying off? So my response was generally, it was too soon to tell. We had a lot of anecdotal evidence that our staff appreciated it. People just openly talking about it. In fact, I remember one individual who said, we saved their life. So very impactful, but no measures of performance of the program. So as more companies like Kiewit develop programs that focus on mental health, do you have any ideas on how to measure the effectiveness of these efforts?
Yeah, first, collecting data in this area is very hard, because nobody wants to disclose, obviously personal issues. And when you do that, some people can feel at risk, right? So data collection is very hard, but there's two things that come to attention. First is, there's lots of organizations, including the one I mentioned, Construction Research Safety Association, that is collecting data from really brave people out there, sharing their stories, and trying to determine whether or not these interventions actually work. So we are all trying to go to the right place and implementing EAPs and support systems and whatever. But that idea of collecting data to see if it works is still very much a hard thing to do. So there are organizations like the CRSA and some others that are collecting this data. And then what Kiewit is doing is, selecting an EAP that is going to allow us to get access to that data, and ask questions on a voluntary aspect, like what are you feeling, what are you calling for? And that's, I think, going to be really helpful in 18 to 24 months, where we can say, okay, well, we think the problem is X, but really it's Y. And that'll been able to fine tune what approach we're taking with our employees to support them.
Thank you.
And I can build on that too. And,
Yeah, please.
just like you were saying, Tom, anecdotally, we've heard that it's working, and, people are coming forward and sharing their stories, and we see more visibility to under the hat across our project locations and our offices. And I will preface, we are going to have an under the hat minimum standards on all of our jobs and projects when we launch our new AP on August 1st. There will be a minimum requirement and standard of visibility to under the hat. So we're very excited about that. And the other part of my job is I get to spend time on the work. And so it's National Construction Safety Week this week. And I just came back from 3 days at a very remote mine in Nevada, Rochester project in Nevada. And it's very, very remote. And you have 500 craft working there, very isolated. They commute 2 hours into the mine every day, and on buses, because there's no parking, and they've got their own community. And I was very impressed. We had field engineers printing out information on under the hat. Mental health awareness was not something that the National Safety Executive Committee built in actively into National Construction Safety Week, but our guys were out talking about it. Our guys were out printing stuff, talking about it, sharing it with the craft. And so you see it across the organization, you see it anecdotally, you go to offices, you go to project sites, and you see it working. But I will tell you very simply, the data is just simply not where it needs to be. And so we've worked very hard with our current EAP / struggled with our current EAP to get what I would call somewhat effective data. I'm not going to call it great data because it's just not, and maybe that's indicative of the intake process, but it's just not what it needed to be. And that's another driver for looking at an EAP. What our data does tell us, and I covered that in my presentation, is more people are engaged in the EAP. And like I said, I've seen it when I'm out on the site that there's more visibility, more people talking about it. That's a very positive thing for us. We're not scared by those numbers. We want our people to use the service if they need it. And so we're very excited by that. But if you were to ask me what the data is in terms of return on investment, productivity, we are not there yet. We simply just are not there yet. But we want to be there. And just like Steve said, 18 to 24 months from now, I hope we have some better data, something better to report to our people, to our leadership on what our ROI is on that. I will tell you something that we're looking at, and it very, very, very infancy right now, is we're looking at doing some kind of a prototype of a watchdog report with Kiewit Data Services, the data arm of our organization. And so what that would be, it would look at the data of a job. It would look at the signs of stress on a job as potential drivers of jobs that we should watch out for, people where we should maybe have more visibility to under the hat. So man hours yet to burn, schedule, number of people on the job, location of the job, remoteness of the job, all those things. We're looking at doing a watchdog prototype. So, you know, if there are any red flag jobs across the organization, we could look at putting more attention to those jobs. But, you know, we want all of our people, not just those that might get flagged on a report. We want all of our people to have that access. So we're hopeful. Lyra has a very, very detailed intake process that is going to really produce some good data that will show us hopefully some of the gaps in our organization. So we're very hopeful that we can say more on that in maybe 18 to 24 months.
Good, that'd be great. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
I think it's an area certainly for all of us who are working on this to continue to think about, and right, it will evolve, because in what we hear and our hearts tell us this is the right thing to do.
It is.
But the fact that we can't measure performance shouldn't stop us. That's, I guess, the message I was hearing and agreeing with. I want to get Nicole involved in this, and because I'm so glad she's here, because none of us on this panel are clinicians. Supervisors are not clinicians either, and most are not trained in this space. So Nicole, let me ask you, how can supervisors be supportive of employees who may be facing mental health challenges without crossing that line into providing clinical advice?
Yes, thanks, Tom. That is a great question, because yes, supervisors, you're not clinicians, you're in your field for a reason and why you chose this profession. So the biggest thing I would just suggest with supervisors and working with your team is understanding connection with others is one of the biggest antidotes, and it can help decrease mental health within the workplace. And I'm not saying connection where you got to know somebody's children, when they had their birthday party, what they did on Friday night. I'm meaning connection as in you're recognizing that this is a person who works with me and I value that you're here today. Having just a simple conversation with somebody can develop that connection with them. So as a supervisor, also understanding your employees and their personalities, their strengths and weaknesses, because what can help a supervisor understand if somebody is struggling is just kind of looking at behaviors. If you have somebody on the team who's a high producer, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks go by and you're like, they're not really up to their standards. What's going on? Having the conversation of, hey, I just noticed there's a behavior change here. Can I help you out with this? You're not diving deep into it, but you're recognizing there's something going on here, as well as understanding communication with your employees. So verbal signs, if you have an employee talking to you strongly of like, I'm drowning, I feel like this is too much, I'm just not focusing, honing in on some of these keywords, and then working with the person of like, I'm here, how can I help out with this? If you're drowning, working up a plan with your staff in that manner, as well as if you have somebody overreacting too at work, that can be a signal of, hey, there's a lot of stress going on, and having a conversation of, hey, I noticed you're a little stressed, how can I help out? So having just those connection, communication, and understanding your team is very beneficial for supervisors to have, as well as supervisors understanding themselves. That is also a big key if you're in management. Understanding you, I highly recommend your own biases of recognizing, okay, I might have a strong thought in this manner. How can I work with it? As well as recognizing your own mental health. And, when do I need to take a break? When do I need to go and seek out support from myself? Because you're also a human too. Just because you're in higher management or in a different level doesn't mean you don't have situations going on with your life as well. And that comes to the next thing of maybe learning about the difference of empathy and sympathy, because they are two different connecting factors for people. Having an empathetic response with somebody helps with connection and helps that person feel seen. Okay, I have support. I'm going to be able to get the help I need, where sympathy drives that disconnection. So having the open idea of your employer maybe having you do some trainings of learning communication styles as well as the empathy and sympathy. So I highly do recommend supervisors doing training outside of the workplace of learning about themselves and learning how can I maybe learn different tools with that. Also having an understanding, what does my employer provide? What is the EAP program that Selma keeps talking about? What are the guidelines that we can with HR discuss and not? What does my employer can provide me for my tools to give to my staff? Because you're not a fixer. We're not here to fix it for them. We are here to be a resource for our employees and have them know I am a resource to help getting you the next level of care. So, yeah.
That's great advice. And a couple of things I was writing down as you talked, because they reminded me of things that happened with me, and you nailed it. And back in my career, when I was a team leader, I was leading a team and we were in the midst of a crisis. And so there was a lot of work and a lot of demand on our team and stress. And one day, one of the team members came to me and said, Tom, I got to let you know, the team's burning out. And so this person was a spokesman for the others on the team, letting me know, because I wasn't seeing it, right? I was caught up in the heat of the moment, but just that action in itself was enough for me to pause and actually go get some other help and deal with it to try to alleviate that. But sometimes it takes somebody just to step up, who maybe is more dialed in with what's going on, step up and talk about it. And then kind of a funnier story, but you talked about, being aware of your own communication style and what that maybe, how that impacts others. When I first became what's called senior executive service in the federal government, I was assigned an executive coach. And you meet with this coach periodically and you talk about different things. Well, I just had come out of a meeting that did not go well. And so then I went to meet with my coach and I just started talking and she's like, whoa, time out. You're just giving off so many vibes here, so much energy. You're stressing me out. And so we had to pause and do some deep breathing, but I had no idea that I was coming across that way. But she, as my coach, said, you're stressing me out, stand back. So it's so important to understand your communication style, right? And how that may be affecting the mental health of others. So I really appreciated your comments and your advice. Right, it was spot on. Steve, I want to come back to you. What's one piece of practical advice you would give to someone who wants to expand their knowledge about mental health in the workplace?
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge somebody in the chat who mentioned that they suffer with anxiety and panic attacks. And you know what, I've been there as well. Had one a couple months ago that kept me up all night, and those are not fun. Finding tools to help interact with that in a healthy way is really important. But even so, I was up all night, so it happens. And just know that you're not alone. That's all I wanted to say by that. Second, if you're just exploring this idea, I don't know if we have the opportunity to share that website that I had up there. And if we don't, that's fine. We can provide the link. Oh, there we go. Let me see if I can share this real quick. Sorry, we practiced everything but this. Okay, so this is the the workplace website that I was talking about, the U.S. Surgeon General. I'm sure which looks like we shared the link in the chat. It's actually a really good, no offense to the government, but it's a really good government website. It's fantastic. It kind of works like a website should, where you have the data talking about how 76% of U.S. workers report at least one symptom of mental health. Wow, that's incredible. And there's links to the data that's being collected. There's a downloadable packet here as well that you can print and have for your access. It's 30 pages. But I think most importantly, if you're just starting this, look at this graphic. This graphic is based on data, and it is centered on what it says here, worker voice and equity. And you have to understand what that is first before you can implement this program. But for me, it's about sharing your feelings and giving people equal weight at the table to help make decisions, create independence in their workplace. It gives them opportunity for growth. But within all of these different categories, you can click on one of these and you can learn more about what that means to be safe and protection from harm. It's not just necessarily physical safety. It could be mental safety as well. What does it mean to matter at work? What does it mean to have work-life harmony? This website is, I've used it in the CRSA, and they're planning on building a framework for, Nicole, to your point, for supervisors on how to effectively interact with employees in this space and not be a clinician. But we're going to use this framework to do that. And this is a great place to start if you're just trying to start this journey.
Thanks, Steve. I'll have to check out that website. Nicole, you probably, I'm guessing, also have some good resources and can help with the response to that question.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to know more about mental health, there are two major websites out there, NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, and they have a lot of resources of just here are mental health, the diagnoses, what to look at, and as well as they have connections to other resources that are national throughout the world, as well as you can even put your zip code in it and it can get you even down to your own community. So it's a good beneficial website, as well as the American Association of Psychology. That has a link to it to where you can, again, put your zip code in if you're looking for a certain type of therapist or a psychiatrist who prescribes medication. So those are some big websites that are national wise available to everyone.
All right, thank you. We're getting down pretty close to the end here. I want to toss out this next question to the whole panel, and we'll see how we do on time. We've touched on this, I think all of us in one way or another, but the attention on mental health and the level of awareness has increased so much in the past 5 years, right? If you look back 5 years ago and compare that to where we are as a country and on this topic today, it's very different. How do you see what's happened in the last 5 years translating in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do we have the ability to take ourselves with this open, transparent discussion that's now going on? It puts it out there so that we can not only work individually, but on our teams and within our firms to move forward and keep the topic front and center and keep making progress. Brian, I haven't picked
Maybe
on
I'll jump in here. I think we've come a long way, and just having this webinar is representative of how far we've come. We are in the business in AEC to make people's lives better, to improve the human condition, improve the environment, improve the interfaces that people have every day. And as we do that end product of making a better place or a better facility or a better environment also applies to our employees. It applies to our colleagues. It applies to our partners, whether they be our clients or our customers, but it also applies to the people we're working side by side. And so we have to look at our people and employees in the same way that we look at our daily business. Let's take care and make it better. Let's look out for a safety issue or where someone could get harmed and make it better. And we have to do that in a more concerted way with the people that we are responsible for in the workplace and the people that we work with in the workplace. At RS&H, we have a thing called Driven to Care. And that's our essence, the brand essence. And that Driven to Care permeates everything that we do. Our actual work, our designs, our construction management, but also the interactions we have with our people.
Thanks, Brian. Again, you have a good way of framing your response to make it very relevant, and that resonated with me. Let me go with Selma. To Selma, same question.
You know, my hope is in the next 5 to 10 years that across the industry we see improved culture. You know, that this mental health improves the culture across our industry. And I think the more that we talk about this, the more that we engage in storytelling, I think that that's going to have a huge impact. You know, we've shied away, we've moved away from talking about it as stigma. We believe that if you talk about stigma, stigma creates stigma. And so the more storytelling, I want to see more of an improved culture across the industry. And with that, I hope that we can attract and bring new talent into the industry, and that new talent, they see that our industry is very dedicated to this effort, and that then that has a huge impact. So that's my hope for the next 5 to 10 years.
And thank you. And that storytelling aspect, I mean, that was something we did at Federal Highway Administration that really resonated with folks. They just having our leadership sit on panels and do a webinar and kind of share a story that was important to them meant so much to staff to see our leaders as people rather than just somebody higher on the org chart.
And you know, it was interesting. We had a comment that was from an attendee: why does ROI need to be factored into the data? Because you know, the data is a big conversation about where we go in the next 5 to 10 years. Seems like a data point that is unnecessary. Do it because it is the right thing to do, and provide an offer, not because there is expected to return. And Steve put a comment in there, and I couldn't agree. I just want to clarify if anybody was a little confused on our ROI. It's not necessarily financial. It's that cultural aspect that I talk about. You know, changing the culture across the industry and attracting people kind of ties into that too. So I just, you know, financially, absolutely, we will look at that. We're making a huge investment on our employees with Lyra because we believe it's absolutely the right thing to do. And I just want to make it clear to everyone that you know, that's kind of what Q absolutely believes it's the right thing to do for our employees. And we're excited to kind of see where we go as an organization in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we'll continue to partner with the industry and share. And we hope that you do too.
Thanks, Selma. Thanks for clarifying that as well.
Yeah.
Nicole, let me go to you from your perspective, a little different than ours. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years, I see with the mental health trend more of figuring out how do I fit within the world, because where I'm coming from is still off of the pandemic, working with people with that trauma response. How do I figure out how to live, as well as I'm seeing businesses, which this is a wonderful conversation, that, oh yeah, mental health is here as well. How do we work with this? So I think in the 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of people redefining themselves. What do I really want out of life, and what is going to help me in the long run with a business too, which is great, because I don't think we were in that society before the pandemic.
And associated with that, probably see job hopping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. As if people answer that question, realize maybe they're not in the right job.
Yeah.
So that could be a trend as well. Great comments. Steve, I'll give you the final say. And if we got about a minute left.
Well, in 5 to 10 years, I hope there's more people like myself who are not safety professionals. That I grew up being an auditor and an accountant, talking about their own personal experience and getting opportunities. I've never been happier at work than when I'm working under the hat. So I would encourage all of you in the next 5 to 10 years to find your passion and work towards it, and don't let go of that. And with that, whether it's mental health, physical safety, whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of impact on people's lives. whether it's small or large, it's a lot. It feels like a lot. So the next 5 to 10 years, I want to be doing this 15 more times with 15 more companies, talking about all my problems and going from there.
Thank you, Steve. And thanks, everybody. This was a great panel discussion. And we probably could have filled another hour quite easily, but we said we were going to end by two. So here we are. And I just want to thank everybody for attending. We had a great turnout. It's an important industry topic, and I hope the conversation continues. We're going to send out a recording to all those who did register. Our call to action is for you to keep the conversation going and to share insights with the industry at large by using the hashtag #MindfulAEC. #MindfulAEC. So thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for the presenters and panelists. Awesome session.
Thanks for organizing it, Tom.
Thank you.